Thanks for coming to another episode of What Lights Your Fire. Today we have Angelic Williams. Hi, Angelique. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. I know that you have a lot of good stuff to talk about. So let's just go ahead and get into it. What lights your fire?
What lights my fire? Oh man, I grew up traveling a lot. I was the child of entrepreneurs. So one of my parents' businesses was a travel agency. And so we traveled a lot. And so exploring other cultures and food and customs has always been something I'm very interested in. And very early on, I realized that America is not my favorite country. Sorry to say. There's a lot of
No.
other great things
Yeah.
that countries have to offer. And so for me, traveling, learning, exploring music, drag shows, and boundaries,
Oh, yes. Don't forget those boundaries. Without those
very
boundaries.
important.
So I love that. Where have you traveled that you're thinking like, you know what? Like maybe we, America, could do a little bit better in this realm.
Any country that has free healthcare, any of those. Healthcare in Europe and France and Spain, it's all very affordable. It's not, people don't go into debt to go get like a tooth removed or something or to have a surgery. But I think something that struck me once I was in the Netherlands, I was in Rotterdam, and the service was great. They were very friendly. Food was fine. But every time we got ready to go, it took forever to get them to bring us the check. And so we were with a group until we kept being late. So we finally were like, okay, we have to ask this question. Like, because I don't understand. You guys are perfect hosts until it's time to go. And so finally we asked them and they said, oh, because we value sitting and enjoying conversation, not pushing people in and out as much as possible to maximize profit like your country. Face crack. I was like,
Wow.
you're right.
Yeah. What do you
You're
say to
right.
that? Like, you're right.
There's nothing to say. You're right. 2 hour brunch limit. What is this? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, and I really admire other countries for honestly just the casualness of just being with people because you're right. In America, it's always what's next? What's next? How quick can I get there? Can I win? Can I, and all these things. And it's just very competitive. And not that they don't have that in other countries, because I'm sure they do. I just feel like the stresses are different, right? Like our stress is very different than their stress when it comes to work.
very, very different. Very different.
Yeah. You had said boundaries. Let's talk about boundaries real quick. So why did you put boundaries in there?
Because I always have to say it because I'm historically terrible at it. I'm a Cancer. I'm very in my feelings and want to make everybody
Leo.
happy and cry in a corner. Okay, yeah, so you get it.
Yeah.
And I always want to say yes. I always want to do the right thing. And one of the toughest lessons to learn is that not everyone has the same heart as you and appreciates things the way that you do and respects people the way that you
Oh,
do. I've always tried to make everybody happy and do all those things to my detriment. And it's really hard to do. And it's something that is really illuminating to who's really in your circle. Because when you're a doormat, everybody loves you, right?
yeah.
But when you build a door and close it, they don't like you no more. And it's, oh, so
That's
you're
true.
really not here for me.
Yeah.
You're here because of what I do for you and how I assist you or help you get ahead or put out all your fires, whatever it may be. It's not because you like me as a human.
Yep.
And that's really tough.
Yeah. It is really tough because I feel like that's when you look internally like, what's wrong with me? And as humans, we're always gonna do the self-blame stuff. And oh, I could have done this better. I could have done this better.
Yeah. Boundaries are very important. There was a short Instagram reel recently. It's with Gabrielle Union, who looks the exact same she did in the '90s as she does
Right?
now.
I'm
And
like, bring it on, girl.
her and Pharrell see the same vampire doctor. She said they asked, "What's the secret to looking so young?" And she said, "Water and boundaries." Can't argue with that.
No, you can't because with the boundaries, like you said, that's where I'm going to weed out the people that are not there for me, right? So I'm going to put up my boundaries. And if they can't respect my boundaries, then that's a larger conversation. So have you lost any like relationships or yeah, I'm saying that you going like that. Yeah. And
Yeah.
also with work, has it gotten, was there a work time as well?
Yes, so definitely I've lost quite a few adult friendships. It's quite interesting, adult friendships, I find. I feel like a lot of my friends I've known for decades.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why the majority of my support network are those people, because adult friends, you don't really know what is the angle here. Do you really just like me or is there something else? Which is hard to think about, but it's true. For me, geez, so last April, I lost my mom. So I was working at the time, and the company I was at, they didn't have a bereavement policy somehow. They've been around for over a decade. They did not have a bereavement policy. And in the absence of a bereavement policy, they chose to default to the company that provided our HR services, who has the archaic 3 days bereavement, which I'd already used up by that time. So they opted to put me on unpaid leave when we also, by the way, have unlimited vacation. And I managed all the programs for that ran the community that we served. And when you lose the most important person in your life, you suddenly realize how many things don't actually matter. And I'll never forget my dad came and told me that my mom died. And it was kind of hours before I got back to my computer. And I remember I just sat down and I was looking at this email I was writing right before he came. And I read it and I was like, this doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, this email is stupid. This whole thing is stupid. The stress we put on ourselves as adults,
It's stupid.
especially in America, is stupid. And I got reprimanded for not thinking about the well-being of my job and employees while I'm dealing with losing my mother. And I don't want to be a jerk about it, but has your mom died? No. So
Yeah.
when that happens, because it will, and I hope it's not anytime soon, but it happens to 90% of children, I want to know how you feel.
Mhm.
Will you think about work 6 days later? I'm almost certain the answer is no. So yes, I've absolutely lost friendships, lost relationships, work colleagues for that reason, but I'm not going to apologize for it. I'm just not going to.
Yeah. And that's, I think owning it is huge, right? Yeah, I'm going to have these boundaries. I'm going to own it and I'm going to stick to my boundaries and say, this is how it's going to be. And if you can't respect them, then bye. Because I know I've lost quite a bit of friendships as well. They weren't really friendships, right? So I just
Right.
lost, like you said, doormat. I lost the doormat, put up a door, and not everybody wants to walk through the door. So with the bereavement, so what do you think would have been an acceptable amount for someone that's grieving during that time?
Yeah, that's tough because grief, I've had a lot of adversity in my life, but grief is my greatest adversary. It is, it never goes away and it doesn't die down easy. I think at minimum, through whatever date, think about it, at minimum, 3 days past whatever date the funeral is set for, because I literally can't think about anything until that's done at minimum. But realistically speaking, 3 days is insane. You can't even figure out like where to bury them in 3 days,
Yeah,
or a casket in 3 days, or
right.
putting a program together in 3 days. It's not possible. Realistically speaking, I think if I had it my way, I wouldn't talk to anybody for a month until after their parent died, or anybody really, but especially like a parent, a spouse, a child. I'm going to leave you alone for a whole month because anything I do right now is just going to tick up the stress and
Yeah.
make everything worse. And all is red, and I don't want that fire. I don't want to get, the bowl because I played with the horns. Like, I don't, but at minimum, I would say a month. But grief never really goes away. And I think workplaces could benefit from really thinking about when you do have an employee that is suffering loss and how do you handle that
Right.
while you manage the American desire for production and profit. Like, there's a way to do it, but it's difficult and it's hard and it requires a lot of open conversation, which most people don't want to do.
No, they do not. So I think anytime you're talking to somebody and you're essentially saying you did not like you didn't handle this well, or you could have done this, the walls go up, right? Because nobody wants to
Yep.
hear that they're not doing it correctly.
Hmm.
But if it's causing damage, if it's causing any form of trauma or any psychological damage, then you should probably change if you care about your people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it
Uh,
goes all the way to the top.
yeah. Oh, yes. What some I met earlier said, what did she say? Oh, she said the fish rots from the head is what
Oh
she,
yeah.
and I was like, ooh,
Yep.
okay. I don't know much about fish, but yeah, it makes sense.
I have the same phrase, except it's the snake that rots from the head. That's the way I was taught it. So,
I like
but
that
yeah,
one too.
same.
Yeah,
Same, same.
it's the same thing. It's the same thing. I love that you said the American dream, and then you talked about other countries. So my father was an Italian immigrant. So he moved over here in search of the American dream, right? Because they were poor and he came over here and he was successful. But I also feel like society could have made him more successful. So, what is your thought of when immigrants come here, say someone from Europe, someone comes here and is trying to make a living? Like, what do you say to them? Yeah,
I
big one.
would, I, my two words, the first thing that comes to my mind is good luck. I remember back when I had my first company and I was driving for Lyft and Uber to make extra money to help pay for it. And actually, I got a passenger who was an Italian immigrant and he just moved. And I think this was 2017. So right after Trump got elected. And so he told me, oh, I just moved here 6 months ago, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, can I ask you a question? Why would you do that given what just happened?
Yeah.
And he's, because in Italy, like the jobs and the areas for like growth professionally are limited. You have to know the people. And if you don't have that, you just stay in sort of the service based, or you can do these other things. But it's a connection thing. It's not a merit thing, and which I was not aware of. And he said, America is the only place where you can go and have nothing and get something. And but actually, he started his phrase with, America has a great propaganda machine. It's like, yes, it does.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
And I think, honestly, from my perspective, and I'm going to quote the opening line from my grad school essay, as an outcast of the mainstream cultural paradigm of a straight white male, I would say we can learn a lot from each other and we're going to have a lot of the same experiences. And
Um,
so if you need some help, if you want to vent and yell into the ether about how unfair things are, I'm here for you. That's what I would say, because
yeah.
Americans treats immigrants a shade less terrible than American born Black people. A shade less.
Yeah, the worst treatment I really feel is with African American and also Hispanic Americans.
Mhm.
Those are the two that just have the, oh, I can't even get into it because it makes me.
Yep. And then you have the indigenous cultures, which I'm
Yep.
also a part of, and we don't talk about them because
Yeah.
we put them on reservations, and or there's not a lot of them left because of what happened.
And what I'm hearing is really it's about perspective, right? What is your perspective on this person? So we'll stick with Italian
Mm-hmm.
immigrant. So world, what do you think of an Italian immigrant? Oh, I like
Mm-hmm.
pizza, I like this or whatever. Okay, what about other stuff like culture? And just, I guess, break it down that way. Appreciate the culture.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate that it might not be your culture, but it's
Mm-hmm.
still someone's culture. And we're not here to correct other people's heritages and stuff like that. So
Mm-hmm.
just be nice and just respect one another.
Yeah. Yeah. My mom would say, she always had this phrase, was it's nice to be nice. And as a kid, being a know-it-all, I'd always be like, no, mom, it sucks to be nice. Like, nice people don't get anything. And it's true. You get people remember you like in a good way when you're nice. So they'll come back to you when you're nice to them. Or they'll just send you a text out of nowhere and say, hey, I was just thinking about you. Hope you're doing okay.
Right.
Like You never know what someone's going through, but if I got that text from somebody, I've gotten texts like that when I'm having a really bad day. And I'm like, thank
Yeah.
you. Versus, hey, remember that stupid thing you did a long time? I'm still mad about this and I still hate you. And I think you're terrible. Nobody wants to get that message. But I think
No.
you're right in terms of culture and perspective.
Right.
People, everybody brings something different to the table. Every single person can offer something different. Some of it valuable, some of it not valuable. But at the end of the day, everybody has a point of view and perspective that should be listened to and shouldn't be silenced. Whether it's right or wrong is a very different story. When it comes to or like genocide and violence, I don't condone those things. But absent of that,
Yeah.
most people can bring a different perspective to something. And it's funny you mentioned that. When a memory comes in your head and it like slowly starts to come into view, that's what's happening to me at the
Oh my
moment.
gosh.
I
Yeah.
remember I was taking a summer class during college. There we go. I was taking a summer class during college in San Francisco, and it was like an intro to psychology or something like that. And because I always study psychology on the side, and so we are taking this class, and our teacher was Nigerian, and she told us the story about a school of fish that were just they just swim around together in a pattern, whatever.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, this one fish like disappears, like just is no longer swimming with the school of fish. And so she asks us like, "Why do you think this happened?" And everyone says, oh, maybe the fish got bored, or the fish didn't like them, or the fish wanted to swim over here, or something. But it was always the fish that like made the choice. And then she goes, actually, with fish, they are communal and they make decisions together. So if the fish got kicked out, the community kicked the fish out. And again, but that's her culture, Nigerian culture versus American culture. That's the difference. We're
Right.
thinking of solely individual, and a lot of countries, I won't say just Nigeria, a lot of countries think in terms of the collective.
Right. And that's actually one thing that I admire is when it's the collective. So it's not one person, it's everybody matters. You have to have that psychologically safe environment to where you can have those conversations. And it's going to take a long time, but I would like to think that a lot of Americans feel the same way and they are working hard to change just that perspective and changing just judgment in general. Because I think if you're going to judge someone based on the color of their skin, or you're going to judge someone, whatever, you need to know that you're judging them. Because some people don't even know that they're judging, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's that they're looking through that old lens. I think it really does come down to walking in someone's shoes.
Or just even appreciating the path. I may never be able to do this, but I appreciate the journey that someone took. Just because it doesn't make sense to you or you can't relate to it doesn't make it less real. It doesn't make it any less valid. So,
And teams
but
too, like if they kick the fish out, which I love that by the way. So if the fish wasn't conforming, so let's talk about corporate America, right? So you have those are sharks. So that's shark, corporate America. What we need is we need dolphins to come in, but dolphins travel in pods. And if you don't have your pod when you're in corporate America, you can be a dolphin, continue to be a dolphin, but you're going to get eaten by the sharks, or you're going to have to find
mm-hmm.
new. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yeah. And it's, God, you're like reaching into the depths of my brain of random connections. I wrote an article once about piranhas pretending to be sharks, and it was about founders. It was about how not to break into startup world and VC culture. And it's a lot of posturing because most, I know some that are purely in it for money and whatever, but most start with a good, they really want to work on this, whatever. But a lot of them will try to break into startup world and VC just really posturing. And I went to this school and I worked at this company and I did this and I did this. And it's kind of like we talked about with being very successful. Like you can be successful, but like at what cost?
Right. Yeah. What
At,
is
at
it
what
costing
cost?
you?
At what cost? And I'm gonna segue slightly, but it's related to corporate America. I follow this psychologist online, and she talks a lot about being raised by emotionally immature parents or parent.
Mhm.
And it talks a lot about when you're dealing with this, when you're dealing with someone like this, you turn into a different version of yourself. Because you're having to deal with this personality, you lose who you are to engage with this, and that's not who you are. And I I remember when I was in grad school for real estate development, we were doing like a financial model for a building. And we were looking at the profits. And if we did it one way, the project hypothetically would have
Right.
made $11 million. And if we did it a different way, like slightly cheaper and whatever, it would have been 14 million. And so we're debating what to do.
Yeah.
And I said, this was 10 years ago, I said, that's stupid. If you can make 14 million, why wouldn't you make 14 million? And in that moment, my body separated and I'm like, who is this?
Yep.
Because the Angie I know can't tell the difference between 11 million and 14 million. There's no difference
Not for me.
because I can buy whatever I want with either. What's the point? And when you get to corporate America, you go in with good intentions and you want to, I'm going to pick on a company at random, IBM, just
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
you can go there and want to work there and be really happy and it's original tech company and this and that. And then you get there and you have a terrible boss or tons of politics and favoritism. You can pass it for promotion. And that like bright-eyed kid with all these dreams is gone. And now there's this mean, cold person that's cutthroat. And that's what corporate America is full of. It's people that lost their way because they had a terrible boss,
Yeah.
or they had a terrible culture, or
Yeah.
they were the token on their team, or they were sexually harassed, or whatever it may be. There's all these things that keep happening at work that cause people to lose that. And then when you do find your dolphin pod, you're like, oh my God, this is so exciting, blah, blah, blah. I'm so glad I'm not the only one. And it's awesome. But for me, at least, there's this sort of paranoia that comes with that.
Oh yeah.
Of, I either can't trust this or
Mhm.
I'm so scared to lose it that I'll do anything
Yeah.
to please these people. Again, boundaries,
Yep.
because I don't want to lose them.
Yeah.
And then you again have an unhealthy dynamic, even though it's full of good natured people.
Yeah.
So,
And I love that you said that because I had made a comment before about workplace cultures. So the organization could do it all right and have everything right, but the person still does not feel psychologically safe. So
mhm.
that's when the organization has to turn it to the person so the person can get whatever help they need, but you have to have that environment first. As you're right, you do end up being a different person. Like I can speak to that. I definitely, when I first started my journey, I was one person, and then I started changing, and then that's when the problems started coming, right? Because it's maybe people don't understand or whatever. It doesn't really matter about them, but myself, I ended up becoming very negative, and I ended up not trusting myself. So the trust is huge, because how are you going to trust
Mhm.
someone else if you can't trust yourself?
True. 100% true.
We
100%.
can talk about this all day.
Yeah, it's wild. Just the things that sometimes my younger self, I was referred to as young Angie. And I recently was showing another entrepreneur friend something from my architecture portfolio because it's relating to what she's doing. And she's, oh, what is this? I'm like, oh, this is the work I did in architecture school. And she's really, and I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, this is like when I was a badass. I had so many thoughts and so many dreams. I was like,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
blissfully unaware of
Mhm.
like how awful the world can be. And
Right.
I know that that still exists inside of me, but it's just
Yeah.
it's a different experience. A
You're
lot of
looking at it differently
uh,
from a different perspective.
right from experience. Yeah, yeah. There was Alicia. God, what's her name? I literally saw a reel yesterday. I sent it to my friends today. Felicia Thatcher, I believe that's her name. But she's a reel where she talks about the quality of your questions determine the quality of your answers. And someone asked her, who are you uninterrupted?
Mhm.
If everything was a green light, who
Um,
are you? What would you be doing? What does your life look like? And then she said, if I wish I was smart enough talk about this myself, but I will give credit where credit is due. She said that also calls on you to think about and reflect on who interrupted you in the first place, who or what interrupted you. Somebody said something, or
Yeah.
somebody did something, or something happened
What's the
that
trigger?
made you think that you weren't good enough, or that you couldn't do this, or this wasn't meant for you. Who would you be uninterrupted? And I heard this last week and I'm like, oh my God.
That's huge. Yeah.
And I started thinking about all the work things, family things, school, social, whatever it is that constantly tear you down,
Yeah.
that puts you in this negative space, like you talked about.
And you hit it with people, right? Because people are going to, that's the difference, right? If the people are ready that you're with, are ready to provide that safe space and ready to change and ready to admit what they can work on, everything's hunky dory. But if the world, unfortunately, is just not like that, so we need a different approach or something. I don't know. But yeah, for sure. I love this conversation. I did want to do a quick shout out to Alignable, because what you're basically talking about is the networking website Alignable. It's not like social media. So you can go on there and you keep it positive, and you're encouraging one another and finding your people, and you can get kicked out if you do a sales pitch, because what they're worried about, or what they are concerned about, is creating those relationships, because
Mm-hmm.
that's what we're missing in corporate. Is Dee should be able to show up anywhere the same and not have to have her spirit come out of her body because of this. So I think that it starts with education for sure, but that person or whoever needs to be okay with not being okay. And that it took me a long time to get there. What about you?
Yeah, it took me a long time to deal with stillness and be okay with that. I candidly, I used to search for happiness at the bottom of the glass, and it was never there. So I went to another one, and another one, another one,
Always the bottom
and
though. Yeah.
always the bottom. And then you get there, it's never there, but you keep searching because that's what you do when you're trying to numb yourself from life. And in 2014, when the clock hit January 1st, 2014, my liver just tapped out and I couldn't process hard alcohol anymore. It was beer, wine, champagne. Otherwise, I would violently get rid of it out of my body. It was really bad.
Ugh.
Yeah. And so I told myself when that happened, because if my liver hadn't pieced out, I would be dead. There's no
Oh, yeah.
doubt in my mind because I was reckless. But I told myself, I was like, we have to get this under control because we have a lot of social anxiety and people are terrible and life is too difficult to go through it sober. And if you don't,
Yeah.
you have to go to AA. And we're on 10 years, so we're good.
Yeah.
It's been a long journey. In that process, I still kept trying to find the okayness. And I could never, it was always when I achieve this, I'm going to feel this.
Right.
When I do this, then I'll be fine. And it's never enough because those material things aren't actually what makes you okay. I had a freak accident 4 years ago, almost exactly 4 years ago. And I literally was on the couch for 6 months. I could barely walk. I was in excruciating pain. I tore a pelvic ligament.
Oh,
I
wow.
don't recommend.
Mm.
0 out of 10 stars. 0 out of 10. It was literally
Noted.
awful.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
And I think it happened in like August of 2019, something like that. And all I could do was literally just watch TV. And
Yeah.
when I wasn't doing that, I just laid around and thought about my whole life. Like, how did you get here? What happened to you? And so I went through this whole process to figure out what I was doing. And the problem was me. Like, I was like toxically trying to prove myself.
Yeah.
And which is the phrase toxic ambition, but I was toxically trying to prove myself,
Yeah.
toxically trying to feel like I was enough or that I've arrived or that something, all this was worth it. And so when the pandemic started, I remember because I was on the phone with my friend when the shelter in place came in San Francisco. And it said, oh my God, don't go outside, don't talk to people, stay 6 feet, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I go, oh my God, I've been preparing for this my whole life. I know exactly what to do. But also, all of you have to sit here and think about yourselves. I already did that. I did that last year. I'm good. I wasn't freaking out because I'd already evaluated myself. But now, when I'm stressed, I like literally Mother's Day just passed. And it's hard not to feel salty when you see people with their moms. But then you're glad that they can. But I went and sat by the water for 3 4 hours, just no music, no, I just sat there.
Love
I
it.
just sat there, took in sun, the sights, and that was that. But 10, 12, even 6 years ago, there's no way.
Yeah.
I would have been too stressed out. I would have felt like I wasn't being productive. And I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to this book. I don't have it next to me right now, but it's called Do Nothing.
Do nothing.
And it's by Celeste Headlee. It's like Headlee.
Okay.
And it's like how to go from being overworked, overstressed, and underliving. And I remember I saw that in a bookstore in St. Pete, which is where I live now, the first time I came here. And I saw it, and I'm like, oh, that's me. I have to buy this. And it talks about it really blew my mind. The first 3 chapters blew my mind because it breaks down the culture that we've built only in the last couple 100 years with the industrial age. It talks about how things were before the light bulb, before electricity, before all these things.
Yep.
And then how it is now. And it's when you look at it that way, when it's broken down, it's insane that we live like this. It wasn't always like this.
It was.
People did always work, but they didn't work round the clock. They didn't have people texting them at 11 o'clock at night asking about this. You didn't have push notifications from 7 different email addresses telling you nonsense.
Yeah.
So it's stillness is really hard in the world that we live in, which is constant consumption and information.
Yeah.
It's, I think 2000, maybe they called it like the information age, but now it's like overload age. That's where we're at right now. It's just complete overload from all the information we're getting.
So I actually graduated in 2000 from high school. So I remember in 1999 when we all thought, at least people that I was around, the world was just going to shut down.
Yep.
Something's going to happen. And it didn't, obviously, but it certainly has changed in 23 years. Oh God, I'm old. But the 23 years, it certainly has changed. And I think that because people are starting to realize now that, hey, maybe we relied on it a little too much coming up, because now you have all these relationships that are broken or not effective, and you have people with all this trauma from trying to be effective and trying to not be broken anymore. So yeah. Oh, I love this. I love this conversation.
Yeah.
Let's see. So I don't know if we ever actually said exactly what it is that you do, like the industry. Did you want to talk about the industry real quick?
Sure. So again, my background is architecture, real estate development, tech, writing, a bunch of things like that. But really the culmination of what we just talked about was sitting with stillness and being overwhelmed, really turned itself into an article that I wrote about toxic ambition. And it was literally at the time, I was 6 months into my thought process of analyzing my life. And I just needed to get it out. I just needed to regurgitate it out of my body. And I started sharing with people, and they said, oh my God, that's me. I do the same thing. I thought I was the only one. And I realized, I'm like, oh, I took AP stats in high school. Okay. So I should know that being one out of 8 billion people dealing with this one thing alone is statistically impossible. But you don't know that because you're so caught in it. And again, American culture, everything's about us. So I must be the only one.
Yeah.
And so I ended up building an online course, basically breaking down all of the different aspects of toxic ambition, because I kept reading about burnout and feeling burnt out and saying I was burnt out. And it didn't matter what industry I was in. I kept feeling this. And that's why I realized, like, oh, it's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. Like, I'm the one. That there's something inside of me, or that has been conditioned and ingrained inside of me, that's causing this to happen. And so it really looks at, what does it mean to be toxically ambitious? What do unhealthy goals look like? What do healthy goals look like? how do you set boundaries? What is your why? Like, how do you find balance? All of those things. Like, and it's really 1 hour a week, handle your life. There was some worksheets afterward, and I had a colleague that went through it, and he goes, he's sober, and he told me, he goes, a lot of these same concepts are the same thing that we talk about in program. And I thought about it, and I said, that's true, because when you are ambitious and you are focused, it is an addiction. You can't shut it off, whether you like it or it's haunting you. You can't
It's
turn it off.
learned
It's
behavior too, because you have those learned behaviors that are associated with it. So if you want to change, you have to go and figure out like what behaviors it causes and so on and so forth. And like you said, what does it cost?
and like you said, I just mentioned Taylor Swift. So, I was born in 1989.
Yeah.
So was Taylor.
Yeah.
And so was Adele. And these are international phenomenon, Grammy award winning singers, and I'm me. That's an unhealthy comparison
You
because
think?
they have talents that I do not,
Yeah.
and vice versa. And when you set those goals, you want to do these things, or I want to be rich at 30, like Mark Zuckerberg. Like, that's the conditions that were in place when Zuck started Facebook are different now. So inherently, you couldn't do it that way.
No.
And there's all of these different things that we do. But like you said, it's learned behavior. And then it gets lost in, is this my idea? Or was I told to want this idea? Or is everybody else doing it? And so now I think it's a good idea. It's, what is it really for you?
Yeah.
And one of my favorites is one of my favorite segments of the course, which is actually the shortest segment, is the 5 whys technique. It's been repackaged and purposed to be other things like 7 whys deep or something else. But yeah, the asking why 5 times, it'll get you every single time, because you think it's, oh, why are you upset? Oh, because my coffee machine isn't working. And then you keep asking and you go down, and then it turns to, everything in my life is broken. I feel like I have no control. And it's because my parents got divorced when I was 12. What?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Yeah.
But spoiler, it always circles back to childhood trauma.
It does. So yeah, what I've noticed is it either it's childhood or it's work. Those are the two where trauma really comes in place.
Yeah. And a colleague of mine, since I left my former place of work, we reconnected a couple months ago. And I think we're about the same age, maybe 1 or 2 years apart. And she says, other generations have blueprints of what to look up to. And there are some boomers that have done the work and they've healed and they've done all this stuff. But they're like, our generation is really the first in mass to try and heal and try and unpack this. And we don't have a generation to help us, like to tie our shoes or learn how to use the bathroom. Like, we have each other, which is nice, but we just have each other. So we're looking at each other. What did you do? What did you do? What did you do? Because we don't have a generation in mass that tried to heal. So look, my nephew is 15, so I can show him a path.
Yeah.
But for people between the ages of, let's call it 28 and 50, we're on our own, for better or for worse.
Yes. Yes. And I love that you said that, because I was thinking, so I have 3 older sisters. So and they're a lot older than I am. So I'm what is my geriatric millennial is what my son calls me. Yep. So I'm a geriatric millennial. That's fine. But millennials would always get such a bad rap. They're lazy. They don't want to do this.
Oh, I remember.
And that's not what it is. It's, we just want to be treated better. That's not like, that's all that it is. We just want to be treated better. We just want to be appreciated. Which is why the generation that we're having kids and stuff like that, they're going to have hopefully not as much generational trauma that they're bringing with them.
And then you talk about cycling all the way back to giving feedback, and no one wants to hear they're wrong. Okay, we want everything for free. But you are the generation that gave us participation trophies. You ingrained in me that I should get a gold star just for showing up.
Yeah.
So whose fault is that?
Yeah.
But and it's that self-reflection. I have a friend who recently traveled back to Ohio with her, I think it's for her birthday or something. And her dad and her set for 4 hours. And he like apologized for the first time ever for being awful. Like it was just like there were moments where I was just a really bad dad, and I'm sorry. And that's like such a huge moment because suddenly it's like in your brain, all these things and these worries and these interruptions suddenly come falling down of, I'm not crazy. Like I didn't make this, and I know I'm not crazy, but you're making me feel crazy because you're denying what actually happened. And just because you don't remember it or it wasn't important to you, clearly it affected me.
I think that they normalized gaslighting, and that's why we have so many people that are like our age and stuff that are medicated. They're medicated with anxiety meds or whatever, because it was like there's just so much like hypocrisy with
Deep
things. Yeah, a lot.
across all levels. And
Yeah.
then you grow up and, it's, I did this for you and I did this for you and I did this for you. So you want to do this for me. So let's back it up. One, I speak to other countries because I don't know. But in America, it is illegal to not feed, not clothe, and not educate your child. So while I appreciate this, I'm not going to applaud you for doing the minimum. I'm sorry. Like,
Right.
don't get me wrong, I love you. You did great, but let's not start there.
Yeah.
And two, I'm pretty sure having children so they can be your indentured servants is not a good reason to have children. And that's not why children exist.
No.
We can go into the theory about continuing the human race and all that, but it is not for indentured servants.
Yeah.
You should want your kids to grow up and do their own things, not forever pay you back for being a good parent or just being a parent.
And I love that you're saying that, because I'm thinking, I was like, wow, because my daughter is 16 and I was joking with her one day. I was like, I gave you life. And she was like, I didn't ask for it. And I just sat there, oh,
I
like,
I I
like,
relate so hard to that.
honestly, that's the problem with having smart kids.
I relate so hard to that because my sister, so I'm the youngest of 11, and my siblings are also much older than me. And my sister is 11 years older, and she used to always say, I'm the reason you're here because I wish for a baby sister. And I would tell her, and I blame you every day for that. It's your fault that I'm here.
I love it.
Like,
I love
I didn't want to be here. Stop it.
it.
I don't
Yeah.
know where I was, but I was chilling until you brought me here.
Yeah, that's pretty much what she said. And it's been happening as she's getting older. It's been happening for me more often than not, that she just leaves me speechless, which, let me just tell you, that is really hard, because I love to talk and I always have an opinion about something. So she silence. I'm
Yeah,
like, oh my gosh.
your daughter and my nephew are the same age, and
Yeah.
he gets me. He There's sometimes where I'm like, I love you, but oh my God. Even when I'm trying to make a point, he'll get me.
Yeah.
So he was like 9 or 10, and he was talking about a game, and he said, I'm the omega of this game. And I said, that means last. And he's, what? I'm like, omega is Z in the Greek alphabet. And he's like, what? And I'm like, oh my God, it's everywhere. Like the Greek alphabet, alpha,
Yeah.
beta, gamma, delta, like epsilon, zeta, eta. You need to know this. It's in everything. It's in math.
Yeah.
It's in all these different things. And I'm just trying to give a little life lesson unnecessarily, but I'm just giving one.
Right.
And he looks at me dead in the eyes and he goes, one day I'll learn the alpha, beta. And my brain went, that's why it's called alphabet. It's right there. It's right there.
Right there.
And he's like, you didn't know this? I'm like, no. He's like, what did you think it meant? I'm like, I don't know, a collection of letters that make up a language. Why would I think about this?
Yes.
How was I supposed to know that alphabet literally is alpha beta without the A?
I was today
He
years
gets me every
old
time.
when I found out.
Listen, every now and then he'll say, are you still blowing your friends' minds? And I say, yes. Because nobody knew.
Yeah.
Nobody knows that. If you ask someone growing up now, you would say, oh, it's the name of Google. It's Google's parent company is Alphabet. But
I'm gonna try to get my daughter and my son. I'm gonna see if they know that. I'd
yeah,
like to try to
ask
step
them.
her. This has been absolutely fantastic. Would you like to go ahead and just do a little promotion of your business and where people can find you?
Sure, absolutely. People can find my website at toxicambition.com. The course is offered in both a 6-week version and an on-demand self-paced. So whatever your preference is, if you want to find balance, if you want to find your why and get back to who you are as a person and uncover all of your little buried secrets and address them and or get rid of them for once and for all, toxicambition.com is where you can find me. Or you can find me at iamangelique.com. It's ANGELIC.com.
Awesome.